Located on the mid-coast of New South Wales, North Arm Cove, once Barramie, is the focal site of our team Ignis's research. A city once prized by Marion Mahoney and Walter Burley Griffin has a century after its conception been revived as the subject of research and innovative renewal. A transdisciplinary approach to address dimensions of urbanism will see to a collaborative effort between myself, Senlina, as community builder, urban designer Liam, environmentalist Shannon, economist Kevin, and infrastructure specialist Alex. Following early settlement in 1790, when 5 convict escapees were adopted by the Warrimi people, the 1911 Royal Commission sought after a decentralised model of Port Stephens, approving of a plan envisioned by Walter Burley Griffin in 1918. With present-day North Arm Cove at the heart, Griffin's proposal elevated the role of greenery on the site, among which systematically wove an interconnected system of communal spaces and the public realm. However, developments that ensued by Henry F. Halloran resulted in a sprawled population along the once vegetative fringe, where lots of land around the perimeter of the peninsula saw to a rapid increase in residential occupation. Ignis's response, the Oyster Texture Program, fundamentally looks to reinvigorate the centralization model within the context of North Arm Cove's needs by drawing artistic and scientific inspiration from the region's native species, oysters. Having started in the late 19th century, oyster farming proliferates the town's coasts, and their refined biological capabilities, as well as that of other marine life, can be harnessed for an ideal city. By returning to Walter Burley Griffin's vision for an environmentally driven North Arm Cove, an understanding of ecological communities may be applied to optimize the human community in symbiosis with the rest of life, and bring to fruition the interconnectedness of man and nature understood of its traditional custodians, the Warrimi people. To emulate nature's fundamentally collaborative pattern of whole system regeneration and growth, long-term vitality of all participants depends on the health of the entire ecosystem, allowing populations to survive and thrive in the face of growth, social isolation, and climate change. To structure the growth of oyster texture, phases will categorize sectors of focus, throughout which collective participation in sustainable community and human settlement design nourishes a sense of place and identity.
Within the first phase, we look to redeveloping the infrastructure and planning of the region, specifically within the CBD. Through research and examination of the current dilemmas that have affected the health of public spaces, we have developed a scheme that responds to such situations and improves the lifestyle of those residing in the region. And reconfiguring the land between services, residential overlays, industry, education and communal facilities, we have chosen to concentrate the residential areas in the existing layout along the eastern and southern coastlines. This will allow us to maintain the heritage sites within the residential areas, much like the pre-1946 council overlays in Brisbane, which ensure any development within existing heritage locations does not alter the heritage nature of the region. Nestled within the residential areas for accessibility purposes is our community services, including the development of parkland and a new community centre. Along the southwest coast, adjacent to the community spaces, is our proposed development for the education facilities. The land is currently not developed, but has reasonable access to both residential areas and the coast, which will be used by our proposed aquaculture school for research. Along the northeastern coast, we propose to develop a marina to encourage tourism and further the existing local industry. We also propose extensive recreational parkland and retail outlets reaching from the southern inland of the peninsula towards the northern regions, extending into the agricultural regions, alongside the lower density residential areas. In the northern region, we plan to provide facilities for essential services, allowing for crisis response within a close proximity to aged care facilities, keeping them a priority within our healthcare system. Beyond the peninsula, a large amount of farmland will be preserved in order to maintain the region's pre-existing agricultural industry. A major part of the planning process within this first phase is redeveloping and integrating transportation systems. A key concern for these systems was accessibility, while still encouraging a sustainable outcome. The current transportation relies on a large mass of configured routes branching off the main highway into the region. This leads to unnecessary lengthy travel times and an increase in fuel emissions from cars. due to a lack of public accessible systems. We propose to limit car usage through the provision of a well-integrated tram system, legislation of limited car usage within the CBD, and the installation of numerous electric charging stations using solar power to encourage the use of electric cars. The road network and general layout originally put forward by Walter Burley Griffin, will be mostly maintained to avoid unnecessary subdivision costs. The city centre will also be mostly closed off to cars in favour of public transport, walking and cycling. However, there will still be main roads for cars through the centre, as well as access points for emergency services. Another major transportation system will be the construction of direct bicycle paths and coastal pedestrian pathways. This will form a radial bicycle network which branches out from the CBD to tourism interest and educational facilities, which will encourage the city's population to stay active and rely on sustainable transportation systems.
At the nexus of culture, urbanism and tourism, recognition of North Arm Cove's heritage through oyster texture welcomes the sociocratic involvement of citizens, non-profit organisations and traditional landowners in the commencement of the first phase of development. Heralding the principle of preservation, consultation with the Mid-Coast Council and Aboriginal Reference Group on land and ocean use can propel communities to actively participate in the venturing of business and career opportunities through Indigenous art centres and agriculture. Known for their ecocentric agrarian model of living, Indigenous principles that are to be preserved in the growth of the Cove inform a cultivation as opposed to exploitation model of practice, reinforcing the direct relationship between our health and the health of the natural environment. Growing in dense clusters of generally warm climates, systematic interrelationships of oysters conglomerate like puzzle pieces, and yet each shell distinctively identifiable. By providing access to new domestic and international markets, enhancing profitability and the demand for innovation, diversity among a community strengthens economy and broadens the experiences of human interaction. Analysis of North Arm Cove's demographics introduced the potential for education and employment for younger generations and immigration by adapting the existing aquatic farming industry to diversify age, income, and cultural groups. Through low-intensity aquaponic and hydroponic farming, integral renewable systems that require minimal land use, communal relationships are effectively cultivated, adapting a culturally significant practice with technological and scientific advancements. Diversity in building typologies also sustains social dynamics in extreme circumstances, such as physical isolation during a pandemic. The floating pods utilized for research and training can be transformed into inherent microcosms for discrete groups of inhabitants, when high-density living must be alleviated for social distancing. Mobile but connected, communities have options to transition off mainlands and explore living on the water whilst maintaining accessibility of essential services. By collaborating in the creation of diverse, regenerative cultures, stakeholders are called to move away from human control in an unpredictable world, to creating conditions conducive to life, where the urban landscapes can restore its necessary and fragile relationship with the agrarian hinterland. To celebrate and nurture human and natural diversity, settlements are focused on a scale of individual interaction by creating cities of walkable distances, mimicked by the density of mollusk populations. Despite the flexibility of motor vehicle ownership, active travel has several positive aspects for the built environment that address social and environmental costs otherwise forfeited by the high traffic congestion, social isolation, and greenhouse gas emissions in major cities. Walkability and abundant community spaces facilitate a socio-psychological sense of interconnectedness and membership of a holistic body, providing critical opportunities for interaction and collaboration in the overhead bridgeways and interlaced paths. Rather than attempting to fix the future with a set of static standards, these pillars of preservation, diversity, sustainability, and connection are intended to inform the ongoing redevelopment of the community, moving toward the achievement of a resilient North Arm Cove with a unique sense of place.
Progressing into the second phase of our proposal in conjunction with the current and past state of the region, the necessity for addressing environmental considerations becomes vital for further developments. In particular, over this past year with the widespread bushfires, an approach which not only prevents such crises, but also strengthens the biodiversity and sustainability of the region is paramount. Within Phase 2, we propose to extend our marina to allow for further industry within the region. However, such industrial growth provides further concerns for balancing the sustainability of our city. Much like the hard, unattractive exterior shell of the oyster that protects the delicate balance within, the balancing of the biodiversity within the region relies on maintaining a protective barrier. A common practice of the Warami people to prevent fires was the controlled burning of bushland, which in learning from the traditional owners of this land, we can implement. In planting new bushland, forming future burning areas, and allocation of current sections of bushland towards the western central areas, we can provide a plan to prevent and replenish the desolation of the agricultural areas. The burn zones are depicted alongside new replenished forestation to be used as future burn zones. The planting of the new forest forms community projects, including participation from local community groups. Through accommodating school children, the program will also provide the younger generation an opportunity to learn from the Warami people. In addition to preserving bushland in the suburban and regional areas, within the busy CBD, we propose the cultivation of parklands. The allocated parklands areas are depicted and will form a central part of the community. The additional green areas promote carbon reversal and the natural environment respiring within the built-up areas. To aid in the growth of the oyster farming projects established in Phase 1, floating modular pod systems will be constructed in association with the aquaculture school. The pods creating more efficient access to the oyster farm will allow students to be a part of the project. Being carbon neutral and solar powered, the pods will also aid in the research of developing algae and kelp textiles and building products to be implemented in future developments. The concept of having floating habitable areas also looks into the development within the rising sea levels in the area and may be further developed for future residential and commercial possibilities. Developing sustainability outputs from the given resources is vital in creating a well-balanced energy system. Being a coastal region with its peninsular shoreline, we propose to incorporate small-scale tidal power outlets to power the industrial sector of the region. The final project within Phase 2 is the initiation of solar farming within the regional areas. Solar will have already been heavily incorporated and encouraged within residential areas during Phase 1, but extending into the regional areas will provide enough energy to power the entire region, lending to our goal of a carbon-neutral community.
Phase 3 of our proposal carries North Arm Cove into the future and envisions a place for the generations to come. The cultures, experiences, and struggles of the existing community must be adapted to growth when given the appropriate tools and opportunities. Rather than imposing upon the community which has been maturing and growing for the past 100 years, their shared experiences and heritage are a source of inspiration moving forward and should be prioritized in the following proposals. Rapid development risks disruption of the community's balance. Therefore, systems integrated must ensure current residents are both protected in their rights and interests, while simultaneously given voices in larger scale development regarding the preservation of history and heritage to allow for more cohesive communication and understanding. This will preserve the identity of the community and ensure that the sense of place is retained, keeping a sense of ownership and input from the local community intact. Additionally, we must preserve the past to ensure a seamless transition between the old and the new. The preservation of the culture and history of the people who once were and are currently living in North Arm Cove is intrinsically related to allowing for the preservation of the character of the environment and essential to making a true sense of place. In practical application, to ensure we maintain all of these given considerations moving into the third and final phase more than ever, the importance of the Indigenous people's involvement becomes key in seeking permission and respecting the sacred sites and not just building around them, but allowing for our design to embrace their past and culture. Furthermore, with the threat of overcrowding, economy, and environment looming over the next 30 years, it is essential to tackle these issues first and foremost when discussing the viability of an equitable public space. An overall heightened standard of living is essential for the equity and inclusivity of public spaces. With the implementation of overhead paths as integral points of interest at overlapping access points, a cohesive public accessibility system will be set in place which allows for us to design around the need for high-density residential living, while also accounting for the general necessities of the public. The overhead paths allow for a reduced imprint on the local environment, as well as providing infrastructure for the community. The interlacing access points along the main paths creates a narrative of interconnectivity and accessibility for the community, positively influencing the standard of living overall. As a team, we have developed a design proposal for our proposed community center, which includes equity for various members of the community and the way in which they are represented, while embracing the culture of the indigenous roots of the land, working with local indigenous artists to curate the architectural form and display artworks inside the center itself. The design itself physically depicts our vision for North Arm Cove, being concentric around a communal focus given its cylindrical form, with the central courtyard. Like all of the new development occurring through each of the 3 phases, the community center in the Baramy Hill region will act as a carbon-neutral development being run entirely on clean energy through solar and tidal power, acting as an example for residents of the future of their lifestyle. Acting as an assurance of protection of culture and heritage along with further development for the implementation of adherence of responsibility to the future generations of North Arm Cove.
Phase 3 has 2 main focuses, one being the community and their living, the other is their work through developing further industry, driving the economy. Employment opportunities and affordable housing are essential to attract immigrants to North Arm Cove. In developing examples of the type of residential development we envision to indulge throughout Phase 3, we have designed a unitized townhouse system which allows for affordable and sustainable living. Our townhouse system incorporates functionality and lifestyle of current population, being constructed from local resources and built under strict low-emission regulations. The design also takes into consideration the work-from-home lifestyle that we have witnessed in this past year, making way for future crisis response as well as future globalized industry that allows one to work from home. This is realized through the manipulation of internal spaces to allow for rooms in the front portion of the house acting like living quarters, then devised working quarters split by a central courtyard. To keep in line with our foresight for a carbon-neutral sustainable community, the townhouses will form a part of our solar grid with solar embedded in their green roofs. The green roofing system acts in direct response to limiting flood and increasing insulation level. Lastly, the townhouse program will encourage an increase to residential intensity, which paves the way for a more sustainable way of living and platform for future further development. The economy also relies on industry. Industry starts within education system. During this final phase, a large part of our program, including the introduction of design and innovation school adjacent to the now existing aquaculture and agriculture schools. Students will be encouraged to follow their further education forward through these pathways and have future input in the development and design of the region. Alongside the pre-developed solar farms, residential solar panels, and tidal network, all of which will face further development and enlargement during Phase 3. We also plan to introduce a final form of sustainable energy into our power grid. Australia currently have 8 ASX-listed company with lithium deposit and is among the world's 6 producers according to the US Geological Survey 2009. Lithium is a primary material for producing batteries, and batteries are essential for products like phones and EVs, which has infiltrated into people's everyday lives. Planning a battery factory into city's industrial sector can boost city's economic growth with the niche of lithium market. Also, the factory can provide thousands of jobs to residents of the town. Each of our 3 phases work to balance with the developing economy, with each bringing in further income into the region and expanding the industry whilst maintaining the community's living quality through affordable ability in residential areas with our proposed outlook for the economic future of the North Arm Cove community. We are largely optimistic given the harmonic balance of livelihood to industry and economic growth to industrial development.
A palimpsest of educational, employment, recreational, and tourism opportunities, oyster texture harnesses North Arm Cove's coastal land area to propagate economic and social well-being by uniting citizens with their land. It is this critical juncture of present opportunities and the possibility of future reward that design principles for North Arm Cove have been developed as a point of reference to recognize the area's essential qualities, identify its distinctive characteristics, and envision its physical development. Though tailored in response to regional conditions, the goal of building resilient, socially and environmentally conscious cities reserve broader global implications in light of historical, unprecedented events, such as flexibility with sea level rise, mass lockdown, recession, and demand for renewable energy. If design is about solving problems, planning is about anticipation of the future, identifying future problems and opportunities, and acting now to be ready for both. Through oyster texture, Ignis looks to the future of North Arm Cove and the potential it offers as a pioneering prototype for urban design.